We have been in a series for, I don't know, maybe 3 months now or so called Relationships on the Rocks. We've been looking at different examples from the book of Genesis. A lot of these are within the context of different family relationships or maybe friendships. Sometimes it's siblings, sometimes it's parent-child relationships. We're trying to learn from the good and the bad and the ugly sometimes that happens about how to better navigate the relationships in our life. And last week we talked about discontentment. And we talked about how discontentment sometimes can lead us to a place of just desperation. And we do things because we're discontent that we wouldn't if we're thinking kind of rationally. And so we looked at a woman, she's just called Potiphar's wife. We don't know what her proper name is in Scripture. But she's married to this really important Egyptian official. He's the captain of Pharaoh's bodyguard, so very high up in the security detail in Egypt, in ancient Egypt in the 12th dynasty, most likely. And she is viewed by everybody on the outside of somebody who's really well connected, and she's the woman who's over a very prosperous Egyptian household. And so appearances can be deceiving sometimes because inside she really struggles. And maybe it's because she was most likely forced into an arranged marriage with a person who, because of his duties for the kingdom of Egypt, is probably not around the house a lot, certainly during the days, and has to go out on military campaigns from time to time. And wherever the Pharaoh's going, oftentimes he would need to be. And so life around the home and in her marriage might not be that satisfying. She might be experiencing neglect. But she has a lot of good things going for her in this prosperous household. But instead of focusing on the good things, her attention is on the things that she does not have. And so she looks for happiness through a possible affair with Joseph, who is a slave in Potiphar's household, but he keeps getting promoted more and more and more. And now he's in a position where he's in charge of everything in the household, maybe even her, because women were viewed as possessions oftentimes in those days. But she thinks maybe this could bring me happiness. And when Joseph rejects her advances and advises her to consider wisdom and God's perspective on the matter, it makes her even more angry because it seems like she'll never find satisfaction. And so she attempts to force him to satisfy her, to abuse him. And then when he refuses, she falsely accuses him. And this story kind of cautions each of us against looking to, we could say maybe forbidden things, things that we know don't align with God's wisdom for us, his best for us, to satisfy our own discontentment, instead of cultivating gratitude for what we do have, and also communicating honestly about our feelings. Because she could have sat down with Potiphar and said, hey, you know what? Like our marriage, I'm really struggling right now. Yeah, I want to look for satisfaction in other places. That's where I'm at. But at the same time, I want to be faithful to you. So how can we better our marriage? How can we make improvements? But she doesn't go that route. And so just a lot about discontentment. Today we're going to look at something, it's not necessarily negative, it's more of a positive that we can focus on, and it's perseverance. I don't know about you, but we've had times where we've had to kind of just put our head down and persevere through some difficult times as a family. About 2.5 or 3 years ago, there's a period of time where I was working 2 basically full-time jobs here at the church and also at a hotel outside Zion National Park. That was a really challenging point in time in our lives, and it was so we could make all of our financial ends meet, and take care of our budget, but it wasn't an easy time. And so it's hard to persevere for that 9 or 10 month period of time, being stretched so thin in so many different ways. More recently, we've been navigating a move in our life, and so we were trying to complete a home renovation, which we kind of started out on before we realized we would be moving, and then it got fast-tracked really fast to align with a totally different timetable. And so, spending many late nights laying tile on floors and things, it was a lot of hard work. And sometimes we just enter periods of time where we have to put our head down and persevere. Maybe it's with your job. It's a season of the year when it's particularly busy. Maybe it's a season in life. Maybe you're navigating stuff with your adult kids and it's really complicated and you've got to fly out and be present with them or help them through times of crisis or times of need or through financial circumstances that they're dealing with. It could be a lot of different things. But we all hit periods of time when we just honestly feel like giving up. We don't want to put an effort out. We know it's going to be really hard, and maybe we don't even see why this is worth it. And so we come against that with this character of Joseph. We're going to go back to some of the verses we talked about last week and then move forward into what happens to him when he's falsely accused and imprisoned, and see how perseverance is something that actually God uses to benefit Joseph in his life. And maybe it'll give us the courage that we need to keep moving forward in our lives. And so that's what we want to take a look at. Joseph succeeds even though he's in slavery and later on even in prison. So I'm going to fast forward through those couple things. I like to camp out on Bible words and phrases just briefly. And so we're going to find the word success or successful or succeed in our story today a few different times. And when this passage is talking about success, the Hebrew word behind it actually means to push forward. So persevering is pushing forward, or oftentimes it's being pushed forward, because we're going to see God orchestrating some of these things in Joseph's life. And it's not always Joseph that's responsible for his success, at least not solely. Sometimes it's the fact that God is involved behind the scenes pushing him forward. Or it can mean to press on, because sometimes we just have to put a lot of effort in. Or it can mean to advance, or also to be advanced. And we think of that in terms of following God. Oftentimes, maybe it's God behind the scenes working in our lives. He is advancing us in different ways, despite the hardships and the circumstances we're surrounded with. And so I want to ask a few kind of practical questions as we move through this as well, to see how it looks in the 21st century in our lives, as well as how it looked in Joseph's life. I mean, this is probably 18 to 1900 BC, so maybe 4,000 years ago, right? Long time ago. But in many ways, our human experience and our struggles are very much the same. So we'll find some things to relate to in the story. But so what, again, hardships did Joseph encounter? Going back to Genesis 39, this narrative, this story in the Bible tells us, now Joseph had been taken to Egypt. And if you remember that conversation, it wasn't just that he was taken to Egypt, it was that all of his older brothers betrayed him because he was arrogant. He had this special robe that his dad gave him that he would wear all the time. And even when he went out to find his brothers in the fields while they were taking care of sheep, he decided to wear this special robe just to prove how much more favored he was than they were. And so they found him kind of in a desolate place and decided, we're just going to sell this guy to a slave caravan that's moving by. So that's how he was taken to Egypt. This is an Egyptian named Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites, these traders, who had brought him there. When his master heard the story, his wife said to him, now this is fast forwarding. So the first hardship is that he's sold into slavery. The second hardship is that eventually he's sent to prison. And verse 19 picks up with that. When his master heard the story, his wife told him, because she didn't say, I tried to find happiness in Joseph and he refused. She said, he assaulted me. So she lied, right? These are the things your slave did to me. He was furious, of course, because he believes his wife, and had him thrown in prison, where the king's prisoners were confined. So Joseph was there in prison. So things were bad. He was a slave in someone's household, but he experienced some success and he persevered. And then he was thrown in prison. So it's like even worse off than he started off being, right? And we're going to find, though, that he also perseveres there, despite his circumstances. And maybe his experience and his desire to persevere will be something that inspires us to persevere in different ways. So that was what Joseph encountered. But what about you? You're probably not going to be sold into captivity to a caravan of slave traders moving through the Hurricane Valley in the next couple weeks. Probably isn't going to happen. Chances are most of you won't be wrongly imprisoned throughout your life. But what are you going to face? I want to break this up by generations, because I think that's maybe a little bit better way to approach it. And if you're slightly younger than this, I apologize. I started in 20s and 30s, so I probably should have started in your teen years, because you certainly experience a lot of challenges there as well. But let's say you're in your 20s and 30s. What kind of hardships might you encounter? Maybe these are things you're dealing with right now. Maybe it's an unstable job market in your field. Right? You got laid off potentially, or it's even the government shutdown, which is impacting your life currently, these things beyond your control. Maybe it's housing. If you live here, housing market's pretty high. Rent is pretty high right now, and it's hard if you're a family just starting out even to have anything remotely close to a down payment on a home, and so you're stuck with high rent perhaps. Maybe it's a relationship breakup that you're navigating, and you just want to give up. You feel like nobody will be interested in you. Maybe it's parenting stress. You're a first-time parent, you've got a young child in the home or a toddler or multiple young children in the home that constantly demand time and energy. And there's just no shut-off button, right? And even in the middle of the night, they probably will wake up at one point in time or another. Maybe it's a loss of community. You had so many friends in your college years, but now you're done with college and you took a job somewhere else, maybe here. And so suddenly that's not in existence. Or maybe you're at the end of high school, right? And you're moving on, and all your friends are staying back where you were, and you're headed into new challenges. Maybe it's just a fear of missing out. You see other people experiencing so many great changes in their lives. I mean, they have a successful job, and they're married, and they're starting to have kids, and you look at your own life, and you think, well, I just took a job out of high school in, a local retail store or something like that. Like, I'm missing out. Let's say you're a little bit more advanced than that in life. You're in your 40s and 50s, and so maybe a midlife crisis is starting to hit. You're questioning why you're doing what you're doing and if you should really stay in that position or pursuing those things for the rest of your life. Or you're burnt out because you've been in the same career field for 20 or 25, 30 years, and you feel like a change. Or your kids just left the home, and now you're empty nesting, and that's hard. You're starting to give care for aging parents, or at least navigate some of the challenges that they're experiencing. Or your marriage is under stress because you've been able to focus on your kids this whole time, and now your kids aren't in the home, and you're having to just navigate life with each other, right? And so why are you married? And maybe you've changed over the last 20 or 25 years as people. I would say maybe you've grown, but those changes are hard to navigate sometimes. Or your body's starting to age, and you feel more aches and pains than you used to. You can't do everything with the energy that you used to have. And so, or maybe you're in your 60s or 70s or 80s, and you're retiring, but now you've got to figure out, what's my purpose in life after I retire? Where do I find my identity? Because it was tied up in my job, and now I'm not that thing. Or legacy. What am I going to be remembered for eventually? Or a slowing pace. I can't keep up with the things I used to keep up with. Or fears associated with that. Maybe your income is fixed because you're retired, and you think, how am I going to make it? Or you've got chronic health issues. Or you're taking care of aging family members. Or you've lost some friends and loved ones, even to death. You're starting to be the one who needs care instead of the one other people relied on all these years to care for them, and it's hard to find acceptance and peace. And all those things are realistic issues that we might be navigating right now. So the question is, how can we persevere through that? What's going to motivate us? And I think we can find some things from Joseph. I want to look at why Joseph chooses to persevere, and then maybe some reasons why we should choose to persevere as well. So let's look at the Joseph story. First thing Scripture tells us as we keep reading in Genesis 39 is the Lord was with Joseph. And I believe from the conversation that carries on after this, Joseph is aware of that. And I think as we think about perseverance and why should I not just give up or become depressed or feel frustrated, one of the things we have to remember if we're a follower of Jesus, if God is navigating our life, is that He has not abandoned us. It may feel that way. Our circumstances, it may feel like God is 1,000 miles away, but He's very much present and aware of everything that we're going through. And I think that we have to realize Joseph knows this because of how he deals with the situation that's happening. It says, and he became a successful man. Now remember, he is a slave in an Egyptian man's house, serving in the household of the Egyptian master. And this is not necessarily, even though this man is an official, the types of tasks that he's doing are not exactly the most fulfilling things in the world. We'll talk about those in just a moment. But it seems like there's this undercurrent in Joseph's life where he knows God is allowing him to experience these hardships in order to bring about something good. At the very end of the Joseph story, he actually tells his brothers when everything turns right again, he says, you meant this for bad, but God meant this for good. So we know at the end he gets there, but I think he's there even now because he's had these dreams. And it seems like he had an idea, even as a 17-year-old youth, that God had some kind of success in mind for him out in the future. God was going to advance him into, some form of authority at some point. But God has his best interests at heart. And even though his life has taken a turn for the worst in many different ways, I think he still, in his heart, realizes there was something to those dreams. God actually has a plan for me and a plan for my life. And I think that kind of might have been an anchor for him during this period of hardship. It says, when his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that's interesting, he's so kind of on task and focused. He's persevering so much despite his circumstances that this is something that other people around him, they're actually seeing God in the midst of this. Like, God must be enabling this person, empowering this person to move forward. And I don't think he understood who the God of Joseph was personally, at least not in all the details up front. You know, maybe Joseph had a chance to explain the God he believed in over time. We don't know how all those details worked out. But there's some recognition that there is some higher power at work on behalf of Joseph. This is not normal for a slave who's been purchased from a caravan to try this hard and experience this much success. In fact, he sees how God's making everything he's doing successful. And so a couple things from that. One, Joseph really applies himself, even in these mundane kinds of tasks. So if you were working in an Egyptian official's household in the 12th dynasty, you would be doing things like cleaning and maintenance. Ooh, that's exciting. Laundry and linens. Yes, that's my purpose in life. Food preparation, personal service. And he didn't start out there. That would be like a personal attendant where when you've advanced to that level, you're helping somebody bathe and dress themselves and put on their cosmetics, which were big in ancient Egypt, and maybe even fanning them on a really hot day, right? That's what you've been promoted to if you're the personal attendant. And he didn't start out there. He started out with the more basic things that we've already discussed. Or maybe you're sent as a messenger to go around this estate and tell people messages, or maybe you're working in the field, but it seems like he was attached to these household responsibilities. And maybe some of you are there. You feel like every day you're taking care of kids, providing childcare, which is also part of this oftentimes, and you're preparing food and you're doing household tasks, and it's just not that exciting. And you just want to not do it, right? Just give up. But he keeps persevering with these kind of mundane, normal duties. And people around him, because of how he's applying himself, realize, like, God's in this. God's making this person successful and must be motivating this person, because so many other people, given these tasks, would just not want to try, not want to put out their best effort. And Potiphar actually attributes, again, Joseph's attitude and his accomplishments to God here in this situation. So it's a testimony. Other people are recognizing. It's not just Joseph seeing that God is in these circumstances and God has a good end or a good goal in mind, but also other people are recognizing God's present in this person's life because of how this person applies themselves. And I think that can happen even in the workplace. When I was working this other job in a hotel, any kind of hospitality industry, you're dealing with customer service issues. And if you've ever been in a career field that deals with customer service, you get people on their best days and people on their absolute worst days. People want to come up to you and hug you, and people want to curse you. And all of it happens, right? And so you're dealing with people at their best and people at their worst. And it's really hard on some of those days. But when we keep persevering and we have a good attitude through that, it really makes a powerful impact on the people around us. And I would say they might even see God at work in our lives because of how he is affecting our attitude and the way we apply ourselves. And I think Potiphar notices that. It's not just Joseph, but God, whoever God is to Potiphar, God is behind Joseph's success. And it says as a result, Joseph found favor with his master. Okay? And so favor in that his master is like, how can I get on board and help support this person? How can I promote him? And we see that happening in just a couple verses. So Potiphar sees that, and he wants to show kindness toward Joseph and help Joseph out and offer support. And oftentimes people around us, when they see us persevering, if they have the ability to help support us, they will step in. That happened even when we were working this two full-time job thing a few years ago. There are a few people that stepped in and said, I see how hard you're applying yourself, and I want to help alleviate some of this because I know it's hard work. And so they were able to do that in different ways, and they had a heart for that. If we would have just been, barely skating by, I don't know that people would have stepped in to do that. So sometimes the fact that we are persevering, other people notice, and they want to get on board and offer support however they can. This even happens with the prison warden as this continues. It says, "But the Lord was with Joseph in prison and extended kindness to him there. He granted him favor," there's that word favor again, "with the prison warden." So the prison warden is thinking, I know this guy's in prison, but how can I help him out, right? Because he's persevering. So those are reasons why Joseph perseveres. God's with him. He knows God is using this for good. Eventually, people are coming alongside and supporting him in his efforts, right? Even though it's difficult. Maybe he recognizes I'm representing God on some level to these people, or at least they're recognizing God's at work through the effort that I'm giving, even though it's really difficult circumstances. Here's some reasons why we might choose to persevere. We have a goal worth pursuing. And again, I think Joseph's dream might have given him a goal worth pursuing. But maybe you realize, I really am trying to get to this place. And so it's worth the effort, even though it's hard. Maybe it's because we want a sense of purpose. I want my life to matter. Maybe you, like Joseph, you think this is only a temporary thing. Things are going to improve. And that hope is something that's tied into more of a Christian worldview, oftentimes. And a lot of tests, even as we read examples in the Bible itself, they're for a period of time. Sometimes it's for a moment. Sometimes it's for 40 years. But rarely do they extend forever, indefinitely. Maybe we recognize the hardship, it's not going to last forever. It's a period of time. For us, we realize if we apply ourselves to a home renovation, it's not going to take years to renovate a house, right? It might take hours and days and weeks and months, but we're not going to be in this for years. And so we can see that. Maybe it's because we're committed to other people and we're putting out effort in ways that it's helping other people. As we're going through hard times, other people are as well. And so we're pouring out a lot to benefit other people. Maybe it's even your own kids or your own adult kids. Maybe we don't want to live with regret, so we keep persevering because we would just, if we gave up, we wouldn't want to live with that. Maybe we, kind of like Joseph, think that God maybe allows challenges for our benefit, and he has something good ultimately that he's trying to work out by allowing these things. Or we want to represent God well in the moment, and so we do give our best efforts. And maybe it is the support system. People around us are encouraging us, and they're propping us up with acts of kindness so that we can keep moving forward, and God could keep moving us forward. Secondly, and this is kind of the last part that I want to talk about, is responsibilities. Sometimes if we persevere, other people take notice, and that actually increases our responsibility. Maybe some of you are at a point in life where you're like, I don't want any more responsibilities. I'm good, right? I don't need any more promotions. But sometimes responsibility is a way that God, I would say, maybe even rewards our perseverance, and it might look different in different people's lives. But here's how it looked in Joseph's life. This is back to him in Potiphar's house. Joseph became his personal attendant. So now he does have the cushy job where he just has to help Potiphar, bathe and put on his makeup and fan him when he's hot. He doesn't have to live out in small huts next to the field anymore. He gets a nice apartment maybe in Potiphar's home, and he doesn't have to do the laundry every day, and hang it out to dry and make all the meals. Now he's overseeing that. And so his position in life, it starts to get a little bit more comfortable and improve because he's the personal attendant. And his authority starts to increase within the household. And sometimes when we keep persevering, maybe it's in a career field or a job, people take notice of that. And we get some kind of a promotion as a result of it. And we have more authority and more influence, right? And a slightly better position or better responsibilities. It also says here, from the time that Potiphar put him in charge of the household and of all that he owned, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's household because of Joseph. And so as he gets promoted, things just keep improving from Potiphar's point of view. It says the Lord's blessing was on all that he owned, in his house and in his fields. So it's like, I don't know what if this guy has some magic charm or something or what, but everything just keeps getting better. So he leaves everything he owns under Joseph's authority. It says he didn't concern himself with anything except for what he was going to eat at his next meal. What's going on in the house? I don't know, but I know what I'm having for dinner. That was about it. But really, that's where this guy's at. He's like, I go to work, I do my job, I think about what I'm going to eat for dinner, and that's about how complicated it is. And so the key here, though, is, again, God. God is prospering the things that Joseph does. God is bringing about advancement or success or pushing Joseph forward. And sometimes as we, again, continue to persevere, God steps in and he helps propel us through those hardships. And maybe it's even in the form of seeing things that we're praying for answered. I don't know, or changes in people's lives, in our family members' lives, perhaps even as we push through hard times. We keep praying, we keep investing in relationships and conversations. We actually see positive things happening, and God begins to open doors or work in people's lives in ways that we haven't seen before, or he starts to answer prayers as we keep, again, persevering. And that's what's happening in Joseph. It's like God's clearing the way before him. And again, God's chosen family, which at this point is the descendants of Abraham, at that point in the Bible's narrative, is becoming a blessing to the nations, which is a new thing, because with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, a lot of times they became a curse to the nations. When Abraham went down to Egypt, he ended up deceiving Pharaoh and told Pharaoh that his wife was his sister, and so Pharaoh married her and then found out that wasn't the case, and Pharaoh's house was having all kinds of problems until they got this rectified, and so God's people were not exactly a blessing. But as Joseph perseveres, that family becomes a blessing. And as we kind of zoom out to where we're at in history, maybe we could say as we persevere, maybe that opens up opportunities for God's kingdom, God's community of followers to continue to impact our earth and our world. And for most of it, it's going to be on a local level, right, in our own communities or in our own families. But we're going to be a blessing to people around us as well. Now we move forward a little bit into his time in prison. So the prison warden sees him also persevering when he is unjustly accused. It says the warden put all the prisoners who were in the prison under Joseph's authority. And so the warden recognizes the same thing that Potiphar recognizes. This man, he just keeps persevering. He has a great attitude. It seems like God's working and making this person's life successful, or this person just happens to be a successful individual, however he defines that. But he puts the prisoners under Joseph's authority. It says, and he was responsible for everything that was done there. So the warden has a really easy job now. The warden didn't bother with anything under Joseph's authority because the Lord was with him and the Lord made everything he did successful. So now we get to a point where, because of his perseverance, Joseph has some freedom in life. His superior, the one who's in charge of him in this prison, the warden, realizes, I don't have to micromanage Joseph anymore. I can just let this guy run, and he does a great job with it. And maybe perseverance in our lives even gets us to that point where people recognize, this person's responsible, even though life or the job or the situation, it's really, really difficult. They're responsible, and God is fueling them. God is pushing them forward. So I don't have to watch everything that they're doing. I can trust that this person will rely on God's wisdom to move forward, and I can just let go. And that's freeing for us, and it's freeing for other people maybe that we work with or our employers when we get to that point. And again, the thing that generates a lot of this is perseverance and Joseph's willingness just to keep trying hard and allowing God to move him forward in the midst of some difficult situations. So kind of where I want to land this morning is on this question. It seems like God has been bringing good out of perseverance in Joseph's life, because as he perseveres, other people see God in it, in his life. He experiences promotions. He gets an increase in authority. It seems like God keeps blessing the things that he's doing, and eventually he gets freedom to kind of operate the way that he wants to operate. And so good things are happening to Joseph. And so what do we know from the Bible about other good things God might bring through perseverance? Because just because you persevere doesn't mean you're going to get a job promotion, right? It doesn't mean that you're not going to be micromanaged by somebody. It doesn't guarantee those things. Maybe there's other good things that might come through persevering, and here's a few things from Scripture that we know could possibly happen. One, the Bible's clear that perseverance, it helps complete our character and our own wisdom. James, which we've been talking about on our Saturday morning men's group for the last few months, it says, because you know the testing of your faith produces perseverance, let perseverance finish its work so you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. And as much as we don't want to have hardships make us more complete, like it'd be great to go without the hardships. Most of the time we feel that way. there is something about going through tough times that refines our character, and it gives us a little bit more wisdom in the process. And God knows that, and so sometimes he allows these hard things to happen so that we do develop our character. I remember one of the things I thought about myself when I first got married. I thought I was the most patient person in the world. Boy, was I wrong. I mean, the first violent collision that I had with my own impatience, it happened just probably a few weeks into our marriage. I had to install some new ceiling fans in our house, and I'd never done that before. And there's a point where you're trying to dangle from a ladder and hold a fan up and do some wiring with the other hand, and it was so frustrating. And then we had kids, and boy, if I thought my patience was intact before that, it was not, right? But it's shown me things, and I've grown in that because it's been tested and stretched. And I've also become aware of, wisdom, like how do I deal with these situations that test my patience? And so it does have a way of completing us, even though it's not fun in the process. Also, perseverance turns our attention from the hardship to hope, oftentimes. Romans 5 points that out. It says, we also glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, which James talked about, and then character, hope. Because in order to keep going, we almost have to shift our perspective from the hardship to the hope. Because if we never make that jump, why would we ever persevere, right? If we just focus on the hardship, this is horrible, I just want to give up, and we end it there, we're just going to give up because it's hard, it's horrible. But when we realize, oh, there's hope, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, or there's a reason why I'm going through this, or something good could come out of this, then it kind of propels us forward into persevering. And so just the act of persevering shifts our attention to the hope instead of just what's hard in our life. Also, if you read the Bible, a lot of times, and this isn't a guarantee, but God's blessing often follows a time of testing. You can see this over and over again. It's a theme that happens in the Bible. There are some scriptures that talk about that. James 1:12 says, blessed is the person who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. What is the crown of life? I don't know for sure. I mean, a crown is associated with a lot of things. It's a metaphor. It could be authority. It could be some blessing, something that happens good in this life, or maybe something eternally, that we experience. But the idea is oftentimes God's blessing is after a time of testing. And we get a point in case at the end of James with Job. So Job is the guy where everything in one day falls apart in his entire life. I mean, he loses his kids, he loses his wife's a good relationship with his wife, he loses his employees, he loses his resources, his cattle, those kinds of things, all gone in one day. Finds himself sitting in a pile of ashes with sackcloth on, and then he gets sick with boils all over his body. And so he's scraping his sores and, sitting in a pile of dust. And the end of the story is that God restores even more than what Job has lost. And he teaches Job some things in the process. And I hope I never have to go through anything remotely close to what Job went through to learn lessons like that. But it's an extreme story, right? And it's meant to show us in our less extreme, often lives, that God still, his compassion and his mercy drives him to follow up these times of tests and trials with blessings. I mean, Israel's wandering around in the desert for 40 years, and as a result, after that, they get to experience a promised land that's gifted to them. There's a lot of stories where people go through hardships, and then there's blessing on the other side. And maybe that's something that keeps us going. It might be good on the other side of whatever it is we're dealing with at the moment. Perseverance often increases our responsibility, and it can inspire other people. James 5 says, as you know, we count as blessed those who have persevered. Sometimes we look at people and they become our inspirational heroes. I don't know how that person made it through that, but with God's help, they did, and God brought something good out of it, and that's inspiring to us as we go through our hardships as well. Only sometimes we're that person. God makes us the example, even though we go kicking and screaming into that opportunity, but God wants to make us the example of persevering to other people around us. And then finally, I think this is maybe the most compelling thing. If you want to show people around you what Jesus' heart is like, persevering is such a good way to do that. And again, it's not something that we would just choose of our own free will because it's hard, right? But the author of Hebrews kind of captures that in chapter 12. He says, let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. And again, we have a different race marked out for us. Your race looks a ton different than my course, right? God has different plans for each one of us. We're gifted in different ways. He puts us different places around the earth at different points in time in our life. He's got this course. But it says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross. And so we think about Jesus and all the things he endured. He persevered despite religious leaders who thought they knew it all, talking to the Son of God in the flesh. He persevered despite a group of 12 very close friends who constantly disagreed with each other or even tried to call down fire from heaven on people they disagreed with, right? They got into fights and arguments. They had different political points of view. They were different personalities, and all the time, he's navigating something. But then when it comes to the cross, he's enduring pain and torture and betrayal and lies and people mistreating him and then eventually killing him for something that quite honestly, maybe all of us are responsible for, right? He's laying down his life to bridge the gap between humanity and God again, to be the innocent sacrifice for the sins of the world, and because people in the moment are mistreating him as well. And so he sticks with it, and he follows God's plan, even though it means something that, in his own maybe will, separate from the will of God, he wouldn't want to walk into. And so if we want to represent Jesus, one of the best ways we can do it is through persevering through difficult times. People see a little taste of Jesus and how he perseveres toward us in the way that we persevere in our relationships with other people. So maybe for me, that's one of the biggest motives to persevere, is so people can see a little picture of Jesus in me, right, in the way that I handle my life. But again, not all these stories in the Old Testament are negatives that we want to avoid. Sometimes we learn some pretty good examples. The perseverance from Joseph is one of those things that if we do persevere, it's going to be something that, again, helps us navigate life and maybe avoid some of the storms that we would fall into, that our natural selves might fall into. So that's what I want to conclude with this week. Let's go ahead and pray for a moment.